Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And my task is to give you a 10-minute précis of a 7-year commission on immigration report with 5 reports. So I'm going to be very shorthand in what I can tell you in this time. The commission was genuinely a bipartisan commission. The members had a wide range of opinions coming in. And the surprising thing to me, and I think to everyone else, was that all of its recommendations were unanimous at the end of this commission process, with the exception that one member of the commission rescinded his vote in favor of a couple of recommendations on the day of the release of the report. So unanimous or unanimous -1, if you will, for a couple of the recommendations. You can see the reports of the commission. Happily, they are online if any of you are interested in a digital library called the Hathy Trust, H-A-T-H-I Trust. So hathytrust.org. And then you just put in Commission on Immigration Reform and you'll find all of the reports of the commission. It's a Hindi word, by the way, for the elephant. The elephant, you remember, never forgets. Very useful resource. So what did the commission have to say about lawful or legal immigration? It favored substantial continuing legal immigration as being in the national interest, but only if properly regulated. And that was the theme of all of the recommendations of the commission. Positive about immigration if properly regulated. And the commission pointed to many failures in the then current and still current, 20 years later, legal immigration system that the commission felt unanimously required reform. Many of those problems were unintended outcomes. That's a classic aspect of immigration policy in the U.S., that legislation is passed. It has effects that its sponsors did not anticipate and in many cases did not want, and then it can't be changed because it's in legislation, and interest groups of various kinds suddenly discover that they're the beneficiaries of this unintended consequence, and they fight doggedly to maintain that unintended consequence. It urged Congress to set clear priorities for legal immigration and deliver on them. And its priorities, the commission's, were unification of nuclear families, admission of those highly skilled workers who were genuinely needed to support U.S. competitiveness, not arguably or we would like to, but genuinely needed, and support for refugees, admission of refugees, reaffirming longstanding U.S. commitments to refugee resettlement. And the commission said once you have those priorities, the number of visas in these categories should flow from the priorities. The current system doesn't work that way. It comes right back from 1965, as Jessica said. The visa numbers are large, and they are increasing, and they were in 97, too, when the final report of the commission 20 years ago was released. But the visas are large, increasing, but not sufficient. Not sufficient for those 3 priorities. So there are backlogs in some of those priorities. And why is that? The reason is that many visas are allocated to low priority or lower priority categories, even as the higher priority categories are not satisfied. And you end up then with what was just said. You have a legal immigration system that is managed by backlog, essentially, rather than priorities. So the primary recommendations in this domain were to reallocate visas. It's perfectly straightforward once you, if you agree with that analysis. Reallocate visas from the lower priority categories to the high priority categories. And the lower priority categories in the current legislation, and I think in most people's minds as well, the lower priority categories would be the adult children of U.S. citizens, the adult brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens, each of which have very large backlogs that are built up, and the diversity visas, which one of the members of the commission was one of the primary sponsors of the diversity visa system. And he said, and most of the sponsors of the diversity visa system would say now, it's outlived its usefulness. It had a particular goal when it was passed, which I won't go into, but nobody anticipated that there would be 19 million applications each year for 55,000 diversity visas. So you have a hit rate, it's worse than Las Vegas. You have a hit rate of well under 0.25% of those who apply, the 19 million who apply. If you reallocate from these lower categories to the higher categories, the Commission said, all eligible immigrants with high priority could be admitted within 1 year. And the primary beneficiaries of that system, as recommended, would have been spouses and minor children of legal permanent immigrants who have not yet naturalized. They would be the primary beneficiaries. Their backlogs would be cleared quite rapidly. The projected numerical outcome showed that overall legal immigration numbers would have risen for a period of about 10 years in order to clear the backlogs of these categories, and then would decline to levels lower than those at the time of the report. What about skilled immigrants? Well, again, if properly regulated, the Commission said, it could be in the national interest because it would enhance, in some respects, global competitiveness of the workforce if they were genuinely needed, and it would enable more immigrants to prosper in a modern economy that really requires skills and education to prosper, but only if properly regulated. And the Commission said the system in 1997, which is the same system in 2017, is not properly regulated. Labor certification in particular, which is the primary regulatory mechanism, does not protect U.S. workers from unfair employment competition, and the Commission said that system does not serve the national interest for that reason. You can see I'm going very quickly through these. Low-skilled and unskilled workers. Admissions in large numbers, the Commission said, is not in the national interest. It's certainly in the interest of some interest groups, but it's not in the national interest. The Commission was unable to find any credible evidence of shortages among low-skilled or unskilled workers. There's a large population of low-skilled, unskilled workers in the U.S. workforce. And wages and benefits for those people had been and still are in long-term decline. They've been going down in real terms over a period of 30 or 40 years. And the Commission also recognized that the family and refugee categories would continue to admit substantial numbers of low-skilled and unskilled immigrants. What about temporary agricultural workers? Not in the national interest, said the Commission. Based on a lot of experience in the U.S. and elsewhere, the Commission actually had a very strong statement here. It said, a large temporary agricultural worker program would be a grievous mistake. That was the wording in the Commission report. You can see this was not a milquetoast Commission report. Those people are easily exploited. Large numbers depress conditions for U.S. workers who might be attracted to positions of this kind if their conditions of work were not so bad, and retards productivity growth on the part of employers who don't have a good reason to invest in saving labor if labor is very cheap. What about refugees? The Commission was strongly supportive of a continuing refugee resettlement program as in the U.S. national interest, but only if well regulated. You can see there's a refrain here. And protection, it said also, is important, protecting the majority of the world's refugees for whom resettlement is really not appropriate or practical. The UN says there are now 20 million refugees around the world, 65 million, the last number I saw, of refugees and internally displaced people in refugee-like situations. There's no prospect that 20 million or 65 million are going to be resettled. But those people need protection where they are, and the Commission strongly supported that. And finally, more flexibility, more adaptability of U.S. immigration policies the Commission said, is badly needed. Everything keeps changing in this domain. It's a dynamic set of global movements. Policies adopted in 1965 are really inappropriate for 2017 or 1997 or 1990. And yet, when you have a legislative process that can't be changed without legislation, and it's possible to block changes in legislation more easily than to adopt legislation, you get frozen into inappropriate policies. The other thing the Commission said was that there's a long history of reforms that have led to these unexpected outcomes and unwanted outcomes by their sponsors as well. And when you see those, you should be able to change them. And yet we haven't been able to change those policies that had those unexpected outcomes. This is a personal comment. I would say that is characteristic of the 65 immigration reforms, of the 86 immigration reforms, and of the 1990 immigration reforms. All of them had features that had unexpected outcomes not anticipated or wanted by their primary sponsors, much less those who voted for them, but they've never been really corrected. So the Commission said every 5 years or so, 3 to 5 years, Congress should find a way to revisit these issues. I know you enjoy, Senator, dealing with these issues. And maybe it wouldn't be the Senate and the House that would do it themselves, but have some kind of objective enterprise that would advise the Congress on things that have gone unexpectedly in the wrong direction. You might want to look at these things. But, and I would add this as a closing comment, the risk of that is if there were some kind of independent commission, then it would be a primary target to be captured by the many interest groups that are fascinated by immigration issues. So you'd have to have some mechanism, effective mechanism, to keep from that advisory function, if you will, from being captured by special interests. I'll stop there.